Hi, this is Holly Brockwell for ShinyShiny. I have here the Vodafone Smart 4 Mini, which is the lower end version of the Vodafone Smart 4. This one costs about £39, which is obviously very cheap for an Android smartphone, and the Smart 4 is about £70, so just a little bit higher and has slightly better specs. This one has a 4-inch screen, and actually the screen is one of the things that I really like about this phone, because considering the price, it's actually pretty good. I've seen much worse screens on phones that cost twice as much as this, so I was pretty happy with this one. But it does have kind of a weird quirk to it, and I'll show you. In that the viewing angles on this phone, you know, usually you tilt it one way, you tilt it another way, sometimes it darkens, sometimes it doesn't, but this one reacts differently depending on which direction you tilt it in, which is quite weird. So I'll show you how that works with the old jelly bean flinger thingy. So if you see, if I turn it this way, that's not too bad, right? That's not darkening much. But if I turn it this way, oh, isn't that strange? It's much worse. Tilting up and down, not too bad. But yeah, this way fine, this way not fine. So just a thing that's worth knowing if you're going to buy this phone. But otherwise, yeah, the screen is pretty good. It's clear, the colours are good. It's pretty easy to read most of the time. You know, it's really good for web browsing and stuff like that. Icons are pretty sharp. It's not amazing if you go out in bright sunlight, but at this time of year that's probably not going to be a problem for you, and by the time summer comes back, you know, it's probably going to be a new one on the market. Weird little quirk as well on the home screen here. For some reason it will not let me move any apps into that space. I don't know why this is. I thought it might be because that background image looks nicer without something kind of clouding the horizon, but then you can move this widget down here and still have a giant stripe with no apps in it, so I don't know what that's about. It's a bit strange. Does it? Yeah, it does look odd, doesn't it? But anyway, so this phone is not manufactured by Vodafone. It's actually manufactured by Alcatel, which if you've ever used an Alcatel handset, you'll probably kind of recognise some of their hallmarks. One of which being this plastic back, which pops right off, and I'll show you. So it pops up like that. It's not particularly flimsy actually. It's not too bad. And in there you can see we've got a removable battery, and under that is a full-size SIM card, which not many of us have anymore. That's that's a little bit retro there. You might have to get one especially. It'll have to be a Vodafone one though, because this being a Vodafone device, it is understandably locked to the network. And there's a micro SD slot back there as well, which you're probably going to need because this phone only comes with 4 GB of internal storage, and more than 2 of those are already taken up with stuff before you even switch it on. So that was a bit disappointing. If we clip that back panel back on, the phone does come in black and white. By default it's got a little Vodafone logo on the back there, but nothing too intrusive. And there is also a yellow and pink pack, kind of accessory pack that you can snap on, which is Alcatel all over, you know. Very similar to the One Touch Pop S3 kind of yellow backs that we saw earlier this year. So that's nice, but I do kind of think, when a phone is this inexpensive, when you're only spending £39, if you're going to be spending money on things like pop-off covers and cases, then it's not really worth spending money on that. You'd probably be better off putting that money, as little as it is, into getting a slightly better phone, because while this is only £40, if you go a little bit higher, say to 60 to 80, even to 100, then you're going to get considerably better specs. So it's just worth thinking about how much you want to spend there, really. But you know, for a kind of a backup phone, a travel phone, a going out phone, this is great. I probably wouldn't recommend it for your main handset, because obviously being as cheap as it is, the camera is fairly rubbish, to be honest. It's kind of, it's fixed focus, there's no front facing either, so you're stuck doing the old fashioned kind of selfies like this, which may or may not suit you. Yeah, it's not great. Obviously you can't focus where you need to, the microphone on videos picks up a lot of kind of static and white noise that isn't necessarily there, so that's not amazing. Depends how much cameras mean to you though, but if you were going to use this as a travel phone, you might want to get something with a slightly better snapper. But yeah, for a kind of a phone to take out and things like that you don't have to worry too much about breaking, I mean, it looks and it feels pretty robust. I haven't tried throwing it out of any windows, but it has held up fairly well, and I think it could take a couple of drops. You know, it is pretty thick and chunky. Those 3 buttons, by the way, don't have any backlighting on them. They're always like that. But yeah, I think it could take a decent amount of damage without getting too broken. Don't quote me on that if you now go and ruin yours. But that's something to think about. Also, the screen, if you drop this on its front, it's not going to smash because it's not glass. It's actually plastic. but that does mean that it's obviously much more susceptible to scratches and things like that. So that's also something to consider, especially if you're going to keep it in your pocket. You know, obviously keep your keys in a different pocket to avoid kind of scratching up that screen. But I have read some reviews that say that it is quite easy to scratch. Touch wood, I haven't messed this one up too badly just yet. In terms of performance, things like that, you won't be surprised to hear that you're not going to be able to play, you know, the big, intensive kind of 3D racing games and stuff, but you will get away with kind of Angry Birds, Flappy Bird, things like that. Doesn't have to be bird related, just, you know, kind of 2D and quite simple. There are a few kind of lags and stutters in the games, and especially if you're kind of doing a lot of things on the phone in quick succession, it does sometimes hang a little bit. Opening bigger apps like Spotify, it will hang a little bit. Had to reboot a couple of apps a couple of times. But again, for the price, not bad. You still get a dual-core processor, which is pretty good. I would have liked to have seen more RAM. It's only got 512 megabytes, but you know, I would have liked to have upped that to a gig, really, ideally. But again, I'm being fussy considering how cheap it is. So overall, you know, if you're thinking about buying this as kind of a backup standby handset or one to kind of tide you over, I think it's a really good option for the price. But again, think about kind of what you're going to be using it for, how often you're going to be using it, whether it would be better to just spend that little bit more and get something with beefier specs, really. I mean, Motorola, Alcatel themselves, you know, Microsoft, all of those people are doing really, really good budget handsets for less than £100, so worth looking into it before you spring for this one, especially if you don't like Vodafone, because you haven't really got much choice there. But yeah, it's for the price, it's a really good option, and it surprised me actually. It was not nearly as compromised as I thought it was going to be. The screen was much better than I thought it was going to be. The battery lasted about 3 hours streaming a film, which is not half bad. And actually it performed about the same as a £220 Archos phone, so it's not half bad for the price. It supports the hardware well. So yeah, it's performed pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. And there's a full text review, the link's in the description, so take a look at that to find out all the details.